Wartet Tzaves ben Yisrael, v'yikhe lecho shemen zay zoch. Kosus lamor laharis netom. ויש לפרש בזה ודרך רמז, מה שכנני השם ברחמה וברב חסדו. כי ידוע, כולם בחוכמה עשיסו, שכל הדברים בחוכמה נבראו ונעשו. So that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created life, He created everything with Chokhmah. What is Chokhmah? Chokhmah is a force. We're used to think of Chokhmah as information, wisdom. We think Chokhmah, oh, it's text written in a book. But text written in a book can only awaken Chokhmah in the spirit, but Chokhmah cannot be written down. Chokhmah doesn't exist in words. Chokhmah is a force, it's a koyach. It's the ultimate koyach that we can find in creation. Meaning if we go back and we start pulling back a string on anything that exists, and we say, why does this exist? How does it work? And we start taking it apart and going back to the original origins, to the original ingredients that created that thing, we're always going to get to the ultimate ingredient, Chokhmah. Because without Chokhmah, nothing can exist. Chokhmah is the koyach that creates differences between manifestations. So before the Chokhmah, everything was one. There was only one unity. The Chokhmah is the one that brings out into manifestation, into detail, the thing that was previously united. And where can we see this in ourselves? In our own koima, in our own manifestation as we come into being, we start off as a single unit. A human being is a single unit. He has one interest at heart. He wants to be okay. He wants to be protected. He wants to do what's right. Then from this point, from this nekuda, where the person wants to stay safe, he starts manifesting into Chokhmah. So what does that mean? Now I need information in order to be able to attain that goal. So what does that mean to be safe? What does that mean to do what's right? So then the Chokhmah comes in, and the Chokhmah starts giving all kinds of details, all kinds of information. So the Chokhmah is something alive, even within man. And the Chokhmah within man is what guides man to be the way that he is. So each one of us has access to the Chokhmah to different levels. The more our Chokhmah is aligned with the real Chokhmah, the more the way we think is aligned with reality. The more the way that we plan, it will actually come out close to that way, because we'll understand what the variables are, what's knowable, what's predictable, what's unpredictable. So all this depends on having a relationship with the Chokhmah, because like you said, Kulam b'Chokhmah sisa, there's nothing that you're going to interact with ever that's not created by Chokhmah. And so this Chokhmah is always the source of everything. When we want to understand what's happening to us, when we want to understand what's taking place in life, we want to understand something that's written in a book, or want to understand something that's written in the Torah, it always has to come back to Chokhmah. It always has to come back to, how does this relate to the force that created life, and created life specifically in this detail that we experience it in? Because this is the platform that we need information on. And so we're not simply looking for Chokhmah in the sense of information that's not involved in our daily experience. Chokhmah is dafka information that is involved in our daily experience. What's the goal of Chokhmah? The goal of Chokhmah is that you continue experiencing the same experience, and you don't experience it as the same experience anymore. Because the Chokhmah is now created light within your situation. Now you see what's taking place while it's taking place. You're not just going through the motions of living life. You're interacting with life in a way that you can feel and experience life. And this is how the pasuk says, Chokhmas Adam Tor Panav, that the Chokhmah of a person, as a person gets to become wise, meaning he gets to recognize the value of what's right in front of him, then he has light, then he can see what he's doing. And this happens as a person comes back to the true nature of himself, because us, ourselves also, we were created through Chokhmah. So every moment that our body creates the ability for us to have consciousness within our blood, it's happening through the life force called Chokhmah. If there was no Chokhmah, then we wouldn't be able to pull it off. We wouldn't be here. The same thing as we communicate within our body, as I'm communicating to my mouth to create sounds, this is done by the Chokhmah. I'm interacting with the Chokhmah. Without the Chokhmah, I can't move my mouth or know what to move or how to move it in order to create sound, and I certainly can't have meaning transmitted within those sounds. So there's Chokhmah active right now in order for what you're listening to take place. And that Chokhmah runs the entire world. There's no separation between the Chokhmah that's creating this very sentence and the Chokhmah that created life originally. And the Chokhmah that was there to allow you to grow in your mother's womb, and the Chokhmah that was there that allowed you to take your first breath. All these Chokhmahs are one and the same Chokhmah. It's the same force. It's just dressed up according to the occasion. So right now it's dressed up in a formula that's creating speech. Another time it's dressed up in a formula that's creating a body. Another time it's dressed up in a formula that's creating respiration. But every time it's the same Chokhmah, it's the same force. So as we identify these forces within life, within nature, we start getting to know the forces that run nature. And these forces are limited. There's not an infinite amount of forces involved in nature. There's a very limited number. There's very few forces directly involved in our experience. They're just dressed up in many different disguises. They look very different each time we view them. And this we can see through the different methods of therapy that touch different areas in the body in order to create effects on the organs and on areas that are in the nervous system that are different than the areas that are being touched. And this has to do with how the whole body is b'chokhmah sisa, that there's a language within the body of how all the organs interact with each other. And this includes that every organ has all the other organs within its function. Like, for example, the most obvious one would be the brain. The brain gets information from every single organ in order to know what to do and how it's doing and how to adjust life so that the human state can continue, so that a person will continue to be conscious. Now, this is not only true for the brain. This is also true for the heart. The heart has an interaction with all the different organs, and the same thing the liver, and the same thing the kidneys, and the same thing every body part has interaction with all the other body parts. Like in acupuncture, we can see that where on the foot, you have all the different organs that are being represented. So this has to do with the Chokhmah that creates all things. Everything is created with Chokhmah. Nothing happened randomly. The only place where randomness seems to be taking place is once humanity gets involved, is once the human brain starts implementing change into the world, and the human brain is currently dysfunctional, so randomness gets involved. But our job is to always go back to the Chokhmah and not allow ourselves to be convinced that there's randomness in the world. Because randomness, na'an chodesh adar, that's the main milchama with Amalek, asher karcha baderech, that Amalek comes and says that life is random, that it just happens to be the way that it is. And this is the shorish of all eitzanos. This is the shorish of a person being able to look at life and see the difficulties and see the struggles that other people are going through and say, I don't really care, it's not real to me. Litzanos means that somebody looks at things that are serious and he doesn't take them serious. And that's Amalek, because if we don't respect the things in life that need to be respected, then life loses its meaning, life loses its purpose, and then it really feels like a mikre. Then it really feels like things are just random. And so bringing things back to the Chokhmah always reminds us that nothing is random. And that allows us to rely on the forces that are creating our experience and to be able to interact with them in a productive manner, in a positive manner. And so this is what he's saying, shekol hadvarim b'chokhmah nivru v'nasu, that nothing came out random. V'atikun shelahem gam ken al yidei chokhmah. So when we have difficulties within creation, how did the difficulties happen? The difficulties happened because the reality that we manifest was in conflict with the Chokhmah that created life. So now there's a conflict between the Chokhmah that created life and the manifestation that's taking place. It's not in accordance with Chokhmah. And when it's not in accordance with Chokhmah, Chokhmah is eventually going to move everything to be back in accordance with Chokhmah. And so this results in a conflict. This can result in suffering. This can result in an adjustment happening where a person has to realize that he's going away from Chokhmah. He's removing himself from Chokhmah. So how do you fix that? How do you fix a problem like that? Again, with Chokhmah. Chokhmah is the solution to all problems. As soon as you go back to the original nature of the truth, everything heals. And this is always the nature of life, that life always heals. Life is always constantly going back to balance. So when we move away from balance, when we, through words, understand reality wrong and we cause a conflict with Chokhmah, so then we have to be mesaken through Chokhmah. We have to come back to Chokhmah in order to find resolution. Heinek shemidaber debirim, he speaks words with tziruf ha'osius, and he combines the letters b'Chokhmah. B'zeh umah lekol ha'tzoyis ha'kedoshim ha'tachtonim hanasinim b'shiflis. So all the different sparks. What are the sparks? The sparks are the parts of life. The spirit of ours is combined of many sparks of life. We want to live because a lot of things in us want to be. A lot of things in us want to happen. A lot of feelings in us we want to experience. And so this is our desire to live. This is the glue that keeps our spirit actively involved in life. Because we have a desire for it. We want a piece of it. We want to live it. Now all these are sparks. All these are pieces of a nefesh. Now some of these sparks have been turned off or have been turned against us because we've misunderstood, we've misbelieved. And now we have desires that are opposite our other desires, or opposite what's good for humanity, or opposite what's really happening, or opposite what's possible. And so all these desires, all these sparks of spirit, all these sparks of nefesh, of life that we have in us that are misdirected, that are misguided, we need to be able to be mesaken them. We need to bring them back. Because it's life. It's your life that we're talking about. Your life got tied up in things where it's not happy, where it's not happening, where it's not causing you relief. It's causing you distress. So we have to bring back those sparks through Chokhmah. Meaning, we're going to combine letters and words in order to create kelim, in order to create vessels, for that spark to understand itself better. And when that spark will understand itself better, it will come back to the original intention of every human being in life, which is the intention that it wants to find peace. It wants to find an experience, a manifestation that is suitable to its nature. And so by bringing back all the sparks to this original intention, so then a person could be mesaken through Chokhmah. Kulam b'Chokhmah is beriru. Everything gets a tikkun, everything becomes back to its original state, everything becomes pure, through wisdom to understand the inner meaning of things and how to reconnect them to life, how to reconnect them to the truth. He brings to them light. Now this spark that was before dark, that was turned off, that was turned against, this now becomes light. This spark now becomes a source of life. It becomes a source of purpose. It becomes a source of meaning. And so this is with all our thoughts, as is known from the Baal Shem Tov, that every thought that comes to a human being is a part of a nefesh, belongs to something real. It needs guidance, it needs help. So if the thought comes to us, this is known as halas amidos, that the Baal Shem Tov speaks about many times, that when a thought comes to us, there's an emotion involved in that thought, and that life force needs to be somehow elevated. So even if on the external it seems like the thought is not good for us, is against humanity, is against life, is against whatever, internally, every spark of life, every desire of life, every essence of life is good, is kind, wants to bring betterness to humanity, wants to improve our situation. And therefore, in order to do Allah Samidas, we have to figure out which emotion is driving that thought. So if it's an emotion, let's say, of fear. So if the fear is driving the thought, what we need to do is find a legitimate fear that's really the source of our fear. And that legitimate fear is that we can't control God, we can't control the Creator, the way that He created, we don't fully understand His ways, we have to rely on Him. This is called Yiras Hashem. Yiras Hashem means that we have a relationship with the Creator where what He understood, the way that He designed, that's what goes always. So we always have to somehow be able to live with that. We always have to somehow be able to reconcile with His desire, with His inner will. So that yira, that fear, that is the true fear of every human being. Every human being has to live with that fear. Nobody can walk away from that fear, because nobody has the power to change the underlying rules of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created life. And so when a person has that relationship, when a person has that depth of understanding, all the other fears disappear. He's not afraid of anything else because he understands the only real fear is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created life. That already includes all the possibilities of what might go right and what might go wrong. There's nothing that can happen outside of that relationship. And so when a person sees that he's afraid of a specific event or a specific possibility, so his way to get out of that fear is to explain to himself, the real fear that I have is between me and the one who created life. That's the only legitimate fear. All the individual fears that I'm dressing it up in is because I'm not facing the real fear. I'm facing life as if I'm in charge. And when I'm in charge, all the individual things start becoming a threat. All the individual things can make my plans go wrong. But if it's not my plans in the first place, if it's the one that created life that made the plans, then what do I have to be afraid of? What's going to happen individually in each occasion? Each occasion is going to be up to me to surrender to the higher will, to surrender to the deeper purpose of life. And therefore, by doing this, he's not just removing that thought from bothering him, he's elevating that thought. That thought, instead of becoming an obstacle for him, that thought is now going to bring him closer to the truth. It's going to bring him closer to reality. It's going to make him realize life more deeply. It's going to make him be able to live in a way where he's more attached to the desire of the one who created him. So this is how, through Chokhmah, through the proper understanding, through directing the proper vessels, through letters and words, at our thought, at this spark, at this spiritual ruach, we can convert him from being our enemy to being our friend. We can be mevarer the nitzitz, we can be mevarer the spark, understand the underlying substance that's true within it, and remove all the klipot, remove all the husks that are covering that underlying fear, which is the real fear, which is the appropriate fear. And all the klipot that are covering that is ways of us not facing that fear and facing individual problems as if we somehow have power to decide what's going to take place on this planet. And so returning home is always a surrender to the higher wisdom, because what we really want is we really want what's best. And the only one that knows what's best is the higher wisdom. So we don't even want to win. If we're honest to ourselves, we don't want to win when there's a conflict between our opinion and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's opinion. We want him to win because that must be what's best. And therefore, returning to the Chokhmah always means that we allow what is to be the way that it is. Because the Chokhmah already decided that it should be this way. To move forward, we can use our Chokhmah and manifest from there what we think can become better, what we think we can improve. And as we improve, if it doesn't go our way, then again we've just learned that the deeper wisdom thinks otherwise. And again we surrender to that. So we're always suggesting so that we can allow improvement. But our suggestions are always readily surrendered to the one who allows us to even think, to the one who created this system in the first place, to the one who designed it all. So this is how a person brings oir to the darkness within those sparks. Shemen Zayis says is Chokhmah. Shemen Zayis is always the Romas to Chokhmah. Ki idea Zach, hay nachuf bei Zayis yas Torah v'hayos es menatzbech. Hay misper Zach. Zach is 27. So it's 22 letters, plus the 5 that have the letters at the end, which is called menatzbech, the mem, the nun, the tzadik, the peh, and the end, the chof. They all have oisius for the soif of the word that are different. So together we have Zach, 27 letters. So it says Shemen Zayis, the Chokhmah, Zach, as you dress it up in letters, Shemedaber tzirifi oisis hagdoshim b'Chokhmah, Shebechen Shemen Zayis, Oz, Kosis lamoar. Haine mashoy metchila Kosis, imoich v'nomich, mamshich loyar. So it says through bringing Shemen Zayis, bringing Chokhmah into Zach, into the letters, and creating concepts in order to elevate these fallen sparks. Through that, Kosis, what's before was Kosis, was all beaten up and was a problem, was a soft spot, Lamor. Now it's going to light up. Now that area that was a weak spot turned into your friend, turned into a light, turned into a source of a solution. That it comes out to light from the darkness. So this is always the nature of life, is that always we see the husk before we see the fruit. Always we see darkness before we see light. Like we see in the Torah when the world was created, it says Vayerev, and then it says vayivoike. First comes darkness, and then comes light. So every time we're going into a new spiritual reality, every time we come to a deeper level of realization, the first time we go into that realization, there's darkness. And why is there darkness? Because when we become conscious, we become aware on a deeper level, that level that we're becoming aware of, we've never cleaned, we've never worked on. So by default, it's been neglected, it's been unclean, and it's been under the influence of everybody else, of the herd, of what everybody thinks. And so when we come to a new realization, suddenly we notice, hey, this area is so not clean, it's so not the way that it should be. But this awareness alone is what drives that we should be able to clean it up. As long as we didn't have the awareness, so whether it's clean or it's not clean, it doesn't bother us. And so we're never going to become clean. But when we have awareness, when we become aware of our problems, when we become aware of areas in our life that are not the way that they need to be, this awareness, this pain of realizing how it's not the way that it should be, that's what drives the change. That's what helps us become different. And so this is the same concept of elevating the sparks. Because we go into a new area in our personality, we go into a new area in our spirit that we haven't visited before, and we notice how disconnected it is, how inappropriate it is, how it doesn't really rely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way that it should, how it doesn't really feel close to people the way that it should, how it doesn't really feel close to itself the way that it should. So all these things, the awareness shouldn't make us feel down. The awareness should make us realize that now we're closer to resolving that area. Now we're on our way, that this awareness, this guidance, this pain is going to drive change, is going to drive something better. And this is why the world is always vayere vayivoike, meaning when we come into something, we're coming into it in order to clean it up, in order to prepare it, so that it should be ready for human beings to live in, for human beings to understand that level. And so first comes work. But then as we become more and more understanding, as we become more and more sensitive in this area, then vayivoike. Then suddenly we realize the benefit of what it really means to behave differently in such an area. Because the areas in our life are now going to look different. If we clean up an area, if we clean up a spark, if we clean up a behavior pattern, then the areas in our life that are affected by that behavior pattern are now going to start looking different. And all our behavior patterns, ultimately, all our emotions, they tie into all the others. Everything affects everything. Everybody affects everybody. And so as we change things, even though it might seem little, to other people, to the events taking place in our lives, to the future that we're going to eventually become, all these things can have major shifts. And we might not even seem to notice that we've done much. To us, it might seem like, what, I only changed this and I only changed that. Not such a big deal. But if we look at the leverage that this little change has over all the behaviors, the leverage that this little change has over the future of that person, the spouse, the children. So every little thing, every tiny change is a big change. So this brings a lot of light. So every time we go from a vayerev to vayivoike, we're changing very big things in our lives. We're making our own tzinner, our own vessel, more ready to receive the blessings that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created for us. So that's what he says, kosis lamor, that what was kosis before, what was a problem, lamor, suddenly it becomes lit up. V'sharish hakol ilaharis ner. The main goal is to raise the candles. What means raise the candles? Haina shchina nikra ner, k'mo ner mitzvah. V'gam nishmas adam nikra ner, k'ner Hashem nishmas adam. So that a person, through his avodah, through his chokhmah, what's the goal? The goal is that the Shekhinah should become better. All of us, we come here and then we go. We come here and then we go. And we've had, our grandparents have been doing this, and their grandparents before, and their grandparents before. They all came and they all left. But what did they leave behind? What do we still have today from their work? They hustled, they suffered, they put in their work, they put in their hours. They clocked in and they clocked out. But what do we have left from that? What's still in this world now is only how much did they improve the Shekhinah. What does that mean, how much did they improve the Shekhinah? How much did they improve the perception of the ones alive so that they can understand what it means to be alive? In their lifetime, how much did they move that needle? Did they move it forward? Did people who came in touch with them, people interacted with them, did they understand more what it means to be alive? Did they cherish it more? Was it important to them? Were they mekadesh shem shamayim, meaning that people wanted to have a relationship with the God that they were worshiping? Or chas v'shalom, did they move this needle backwards? Did they move it away? This is ultimately the measure of what we leave behind. So we put in our work, we put in our 70, 80, 90 years, but that's just planting a seed. What's the tree that's going to grow from that seed? The tree that's going to grow from that seed is, what did your presence in this world cause people to think about the one who created it? And those people include yourself. What changed? What did you received information as you came in, and then you left information behind as you went through. What did that do? What type of transformation did you make with the information? How did you affect the Chokhmah? Did you improve the Chokhmah? Did you clean the Chokhmah? Did you bring it closer to truth? Did you make it less faulty? Are there less pitfalls in the Chokhmah so that people won't trip over themselves as they're trying to live? Is it easier to understand a human being? Is it easier to love a human being? All these little changes, to the extent that our grandparents made, and many of them did, many of them I'm sure put in a lot of effort into this, and they actually made a big difference, and to that degree we're very grateful for them because our lives are better for it. But the events surrounding and the fact that we're in Galus meant that whatever good they were doing, there were forces working in the opposite direction that were traveling much faster. And this is the nature of Galus. And this is why people today don't find it a privilege to have a relationship with the one who created life. In fact, most people find it a burden. And that's because his name has been reduced to less than nothing. What does it mean, less than nothing? That many people would pay money to not have to deal with him. That's less than nothing. He's the same one. He's the same one that everybody was dying to get to know not that long ago, relatively speaking. But now people feel like they don't want to know him. They're afraid of him, they're confused by him, and they feel like he's not fair, that he didn't give us a fair chance, that he didn't give us what we require in order to function. And this has very much to do with the people, not only our own ancestors, but all the people alive, and how they interacted with life, what they made life look like. What does it feel like to live? That's very much a part of how our relationship is going to be with the Chokhmah. And so the Chokhmah that's within all things, the Chokhmah of Kulam b'Chokhmah Sisa, is under attack. Who's attacking it? Amalek. The underlying source of who's attacking it is Amalek. What does Amalek say? It's no Chokhmah, it's no wisdom, it's just random stuff, it doesn't even work. That's the underlying argument. And from that argument, from that Amalek, can come 70 cultures which are all based on nonsense. Where the whole culture is just, how are we going to pass our time and not have to think about the important subjects of life? How are we going to be able to balance our chemicals and not need to think about the truth? So we'll have shows, and we'll have different ways of dressing, and we'll have different things to be busy with, and different types of entertainment, and we'll keep the minds busy so that they can get their chemicals, they'll get upset and happy, and they'll laugh, and they'll cry, and they'll go through all the motions as if they're alive, but life is not going to happen to these people. They're going to be completely disconnected from life. Their sadness about life, they're going to feel in the movie about somebody else's life that never happened. But their own sadness, they're going to be too depressed to even feel. They're going to be completely disconnected from their own sadness, because there's not going to be a show to explain it to them. And so all these cultures do is they disconnect us from really experiencing life. And then they tell us, you see, life is broken, it doesn't work, what do you want? And so to bring back kavod to the Chokhmah, to bring back our following to the Chokhmah, means to start investigating what is the nature of what was created, what is the nature of the interaction that we're supposed to have with it. What is the truth about this relationship? And what was our time and effort and energy supposed to be spent on according to the original design? What were we really supposed to be doing here? Certainly wasn't to make money or creating companies or entertaining ourselves for that matter. There must be an underlying purpose. And that underlying purpose is the Chokhmah itself. The Chokhmah has such a desire to create this world, to create this reality, because at the end of it, when we're mature enough, the Chokhmah can share itself with us. We can appreciate it. So it designed us in such a way that we can appreciate Chokhmah. Our entire nervous system, our entire ability to speak was created and formulated in such a way so that the Chokhmah can let us know it. So that eventually we and the Chokhmah can merge, so that we can understand it and appreciate it and receive our chemicals from there. And this is what it's called, Tzadikim Yoshvim v'Tersayim b'Neshem v'Nehenim miziv hashchina. That they don't need anything else other than the fact that the Chokhmah created this reality, just by observing that fact is alone, to feed their entire nervous system. And this gave them such pleasure to the people who got to these places, that it was better for them and healthier for them than eating and drinking. They would walk away from such an event, which could have been sometimes sitting for a few days without eating or drinking, and they would walk away healthier than somebody else who spent that time having whatever the world has to offer. And this is how we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, that 120 years, he didn't dry, his skin didn't get dry, because he was so healthy. How was he so healthy? Because he was always in tune with the Chokhmah. He never got into conflict with the Chokhmah. The only times that he had trouble with the Chokhmah was because Klal Yisrael was dragging him down. Klal Yisrael was constantly causing problems where he had to try to figure out between them and the truth how to negotiate. But he, as far as himself was concerned, like he said on himself, Vanachni Mo. What is Mo? Chokhmah stands for Koyach Mo. Koyach Mo means the force of potential, the force of possibility. In every oxygen particle that we breathe in, there's the potential to think any thought. And we, our minds, our brains, based on who's breathing it in and the situation we're in, we're going to decide what thought to think with that particle of oxygen. And then that's going to become the nature of that particle. It's going to receive a chosam, it's going to receive a stamp based on that interaction. Now this Chokhmah is the one that decides what shape, what color, what flavor that particle is going to take. And that's why it's called Koyach Ma, the force of potential, the force of possibility, the force of taking things out of ayin, out of no thought, out of nothing, out of empty air, and making it into a yesh, creating a thought, creating a concept, creating an idea, creating a malach. Now this Koyach Ma can go in any direction. It's the potential to be anything. And so Moshe Rabbeinu says about himself and Aharon, Vanachnu Ma, we are that potential. We are as clear as the Chokhmah itself. We don't carry any fictitious story that we're trying to justify in our behavior. When we receive instruction, Vanachnu Ma, we're the same Ma as the Koyach Ma. We allow the Chokhmah to come in pure. And as it says, so we say. We hold no individual personal agenda over here. And so this is the Koyach of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's why it's called Anav Mikol Adam. Anav Mikol Adam, not because he didn't know his greatness. Anav Mikol Adam, not because he was hiding and he didn't do his leadership the way that he should have. He stood in front of kings. He stood in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and he led them. His anova wasn't his lack of awareness of what was happening. His anova was that even after all that, he was willing to give up his thoughts, his ideas, his perceptions of what should be and what could be and what might be. And he was willing to snap into reality at any given moment, regardless of what's taking place. to be there connected to the Chokhmah and ask the Chokhmah, okay, so this is the scenario, what do we do now? And so that's why he was Onav Mikol Adam, because he was the closest a person ever was to instantaneously surrender to reality every single time, regardless of what's taking place. And this is what made him the Novi Mikol Adam, that he had prophecy like nobody else, because he was so ready to go wherever he needed to go. He so deeply understood who he's interacting with. He wasn't fooled by his imagination. He wasn't fooled by his senses. His seichel was so in charge that he always understood that his negotiation is only with the Chokhmah Elyoina. And therefore, when the Chokhmah decides something, when reality happens, no man, regardless of how great, should have any objection. Our only work is to surrender to what already happened. From there forward, we can try, we can create, we can think, we can plan. But never in a way where we're telling life what needs to happen. Always in a way of suggesting, and if it doesn't happen, then instantly we surrender to that truth. Because this is the nature of life. This is the difference between being run by the seichel. The seichel knows reality and knows how to conform, and running with the imagination, where the imagination is always stuck on alternatives. The imagination is always in an alternate reality, trying to say what could have been and what should have been and what might have been, and that was so much better, and this could have been so much better, and why isn't he like this and she like that? And all this is us arguing with what's already created, with what already happened, with something that we can never change. And so to live with the Chokhmah means to trust the Chokhmah. And when a person trusts the Chokhmah, then it's Lahalas Ner Tamid, that Kaviyachol the Shechina, which is the reality that's already created, which is called Zois, the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose it, each part the way that it is, each force in its place, each koyach doing the functions that it's doing, then he brings her back to the Chokhmah, he brings her back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the Neshama, Kener Hashem Nishmas Adam. V'la'aloisam lebchinas Tamid, she bechinas arba alf Hashem and arba ayah, that a person should bring this connection, this realization to the level of Tamid. What does it mean, Tamid? That there's attachments that we can have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that have different names. Each relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a different name. So there's a name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe before he took Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. And that name is known, it's called the name of Geula. It's the name that takes people out of their exile, whatever they may be, the name of redemption. And that name is called the name of Ehyeh. And why is that a name of redemption? Because the name of Avaya, the Shem Amphorish, the name we usually refer to as HaKadosh Baruch Hu, means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, was, and will be, all at the same time, always. And that's a level that we can get to when we're in a very, very deep stillness, that we're in a very deep place. We can merge with that name. We can merge with that part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is beyond everything. But when a person is in galus, when a person is suffering, he can't find access to that name. That name is blocked. That's why now when we refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't refer to him with that name. We refer to him with the name of Adna. Adna means that there are forces. Adna is a Lashon Rabim. Adna means many, just like the Shem Elokim, which means many. That there are forces within my imagination that are controlling me, and I don't understand them. So that's like the cover of the Shem Havaya. The Shem Havaya is that point of life within me that's beyond time, that's beyond space, that's beyond any manifestation. To him, we don't have access right now in Galus. But we have access to Adna. Adna is the one that's the part of our imagination that's covering that reality, and through that we live. We interact with our imagination. We can't interact directly with the life force, with the seichel that created us. But the Shem Ehyeh says that even though right now I don't have access to the deeper self, to the real me, even though right now I can't be me, so to speak, Ehyeh, I will be me. How do I know that I will be me? Because Hashem created me. If Hashem created me, it means that eventually I will be me. Right now I'm still growing. I'm in the middle of growing to become me. I didn't finish growing yet, so I'm suffering. I'm going through change. I'm going through all kinds of transitions and transformations. But eventually, I'm going to be. This was the purpose of creation. This is the reason I'm here. And so when a person connects to that, then this name starts taking him out of Golus. The nature of Golus is that a person doesn't think doesn't think I'm going to be. He thinks I'm gone. He thinks my life is just too hard. It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't work. And that obviously comes from a type of amalek. It comes from a type of separation from reality. How could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would create something in vain and it's never going to work and it's not going to happen? Why would he do anything like that? It must be that we're fooling ourselves. And so when a person connects to that name which says, I'm going to be, he starts coming out of Golus. He starts becoming more of himself. And that eventually brings it so that he can takabi. So, for example, by Moshe Rabbeinu, he goes to Klal Yisrael and he says, Eya shelchani alechem. The name of going to be sent me to you, and it says, people start preparing, you're going to be, which means we're taking you out of here. The slavery is over. So then this starts a process of Gula. This starts a change of thought in the people. And eventually, when they get to Har Sinai and they realize Anoich Hashem Lekecha, then they have access to the Shem HaFarish. Then it's Mekim, the Nevuah, that says, I'm going to be. When are you going to be? When they come to Har Sinai, that's where I'm going to be. And so this awakening of that name, when a person realizes that inevitably, at the end, every person is going to get to their correction, every person is going to get to their perfection, every person is going to get to their purpose. That's why they were created lechatchila, by the one who could see, the one who could know. So then this attaches them to a future world. This attaches them to a better place. There's a word like that from the Ishbitzer. He says that when a Jew believes that there's going to be another world, that there's going to be a world that's better than this one, that Jew is already called the Yisrael Noisha B'Shem. He's a person that's being held by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why is he being held by HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Just by believing that there's a world better than this one. Because for somebody to believe that, he has to believe that the one who created life created good. If somebody doesn't believe that he created good, then how do you know there's going to be a better world? Why do you even wait for Olam Haba? Why wait for anything? And so that belief intrinsically says, I believe that the Creator is good. I believe that the Creator is kind. And so that alone, that belief alone, that's a Yeshua. That changes our entire approach to what's happening. That changes the story while it's happening. As long as we didn't have that belief, as long as we weren't attached to that truth, the story was happening, but it was happening terribly. It wasn't going well for anyone. Now that we believe it, this belief will change the story. It will change the behavior. It will change how things come out. It will change what manifests and what happens. So this is what he's saying, that the Shem Eke makes it a name. So he calls it Tamid. What does it mean, Tamid? That the name of Avaya, where we connect to something that's beyond time and space, this is something we can't have all the time. As long as we're in Golus, even if a person gains access to very high levels, soon he has to fall. He has to go down into the lower levels to bring light to the Netzotzes, like we said before. First comes darkness, then comes light, which means every level we're going to go up, every level that we're going to go deeper and closer to the truth, we're going to realize more darkness that we have to clean before we can recognize the light in that place. So the Shem Havaya is not a name that we can connect to always. It's a name that comes and goes. It's a name that gets covered, and it's a name that gets open. And that's why we use the Shem Adna. The Shem Adna is the cover. And that's why Adna is Gematria Heichal. It's like a Heichal, it's like a room within which the Shem Havaya is hiding. But the Shem Eke, the Shem Eyad, the Shem of I will be, that name is a name that you can have always. Always will you be. You've never been in a situation in your life where you were, but things were not going to be better. Things were not going to be different. And it's just like we have this moment right now. So every moment before this moment had in it the pregnancy of this moment. This moment is eventually going to take place. That moment carried this moment in it. If it didn't, we wouldn't be here. And so this moment has been carried for all this time because this moment needs to happen. It needs to be. And so eventually there will be a moment of perfection that needs to happen. There will be a recognition of the true nature of the soul. There will be a place where the illusion gets peeled back and the truth comes out and the beauty of reality shines. And so that name is a name that we can hold on to always. There's always a pregnancy of something to come, and there's always a perfection that's going to happen down the line. So we should all be zoche, the perfection should come speedily. What's the
difference between Shechina and Chokhmah?
the Shechina is sometimes called Chokhmah Tator. So the Chokhmah is the original force that creates life. The Shechina is the life that was created after all the forces come together. So the manifested, all the manifested life, including you and I, is part of the Shechina. And Klal Yisrael is like the most conscious part of the Shechina, because it's the most conscious part of the manifested life. So for example, when Shlomo HaMelech had the Chokhmah that he had, so his Chokhmah is considered to be Chokhmah Tator, the lower level Chokhmah. Why is it the lower level Chokhmah? It's the lower level because it's the part that's manifested inside creation. So the Chokhmah Elyoinah is like the Father that created all of life, and that Chokhmah created individuals, created people, created minds, created spirits, and within those spirits it gives from itself. It gives Chokhmah, like we say, Shecholak michachmasa lirev. So when Shlomo HaMelech received Chokhmah, he received Chokhmah from the bigger Chokhmah, and he received, in accordance with his vessel, a very big portion that he was able to bring into the Chokhmah Tator, to bring into manifestation. So for most people, the higher Chokhmah cannot give them too much of itself, because they don't have the vessels to contain it. But the Shlomo HaMelech, the higher Chokhmah could share with him. And because the higher Chokhmah could share with him, he wrote Shir HaShirim as his relationship with the higher Chokhmah. The whole Shir HaShirim, the love story, is the love story between Shlomo HaMelech and the Chokhmah, as he's trying to perceive it. And he's constantly like dancing with it, trying to get more of it. And as this scenario happens, and as the people go in different ways, the Chokhmah is getting closer and further away.
So how does a person create a larger vessel to tap into that Chokhmah?
So there's a few different things, but the basic ingredients are the intelligence, so that a person should develop his imagination by reading, learning, studying, and just trying to get into his mind, so that his mind can start developing, so that he can direct a lot of energy and concentration to his mind. And secondly is the midos. If a person doesn't have the appropriate midos, he can't get along with the Chokhmah, because the Chokhmah specifically created life that it should work only for good midos. This is why when we misbehave, there's so much consequence, there's so much damage to our system and to our experience, because the Chokhmah is not happy with that type of behavior. So when we want to join the Chokhmah, we want to understand the Chokhmah, it means that we have to first know how to behave in accordance with how it sees life. Because only then can we look from its point of view. Only then can we try to even see what it's trying to do over here. So the midas and the intelligence, the moichen and the midas, those are the two most important ingredients.
You said dimyan, but dimyan I thought we need to stay away from.
Dimyan is a kli for Chokhmah. We can't understand Chokhmah without imagination, because the dimyan is our only way of communicating with the conscious mind. The conscious mind doesn't have any other language that it speaks. But the question is, where does the imagination take its information from? So if the information comes from the seichel, from reality, then that's a good dimyan, because the dimyan is now serving its master. It's serving the Chokhmah in order to create real interpretation. But when the dimyan starts taking from stories and from monkey thoughts, where it's comparing things to other things and starting to make its own, so those types of thoughts are taking a person further away from the Chokhmah. It's not based on truth, it's not based on reality, it's based on fancy, it's based on mood, it's based on nonsensical calculations. So all that fills up the mind with information that's not reliable. So it moves further away from the Chokhmah.
So how do you know if you're getting your thoughts from Chokhmah or from the monkey brain?
So that's not simple, actually. The whole Torah is for this, is to be able to differentiate, because the Torah is about knowing the seichel, knowing the truth, and the only real way to know is to know the truth, and then you know what's true and what's not true, what could be and what can be. But until then, the general guidelines are that the seichel has a understanding of the underlying causes of things. It has an understanding of the more general rules of how things work, versus the imagination, which is usually concerned more with things that come in from the senses, like visuals and sound, and this guy said this and that guy said that, and I saw ice cream and I saw this person, like all these different things come in they just interact directly with the imagination. There's no seichel to it. So the seichel only gets involved when we're trying to analyze, or we're trying to look on the deeper level of things, like what's really taking place over here. So that's when the seichel comes in. So we would say the seichel is speaking more about what's really true, what we call what's true be'etzem, what's true because it must be that way. And the imagination is more busy with what's true b'mikre, what happened over there, what was the happenstance, how did it look, what were the colors, what were the people, but not so much the substance of what's happening underneath.
So intuition is when you're tapped into the Chokhmah, and it's not necessarily a thought, it's a knowing, right? When you have an intuition, it's like almost like is that when it's a direct?
So it depends. Intuition for everybody is different. And it depends a lot on what a person calls intuition. But there is a type of intuition that comes from the seichel, but there's also types of intuitions that come just from the gut, from what happened in the past, or where not everybody has a pure intuition where they can really tell how to behave based on that. So for most people, it's much safer to look for seichel, to look for underlying stuff, and not just go based on gut feelings. You should take it into consideration and consider, what are really the best options. But just because we assume something doesn't make it an intuition.
But what does that mean with being in touch with our inner voice? That
inner voice is to check yourself about how things are going to make you feel and what's really going to be the result of doing something versus not doing it. But not necessarily just jumping to a conclusion based on a thought. That's not our inner voice. We have to refine our inner voice. We have to refine our access. So for example, we see a person and we think, they don't look like a nice person. We don't necessarily want to get to know them or whatever. We jump to different types of judgments or conclusions. So these are not intuitions. These are just habits of thought that could get in the way of our life. It could very well be that we can gain a lot from that person, or that we can learn, or whatever. But our mind is so used to going in a certain path that it jumps there before we even get a chance. But that's intuition. But being in touch with our inner self is not about intuition. It's about being sensitive to the fact that there's a human being living inside of you. And so if you would think that it's inappropriate, or it's too much, or it's too difficult to do this upon another person, then consider yourself another person and have the respect for your own condition and for your own needs and for your own feelings, just like it would be anybody else. So that's listening to yourself and seeing yourself as the individual that you are. But to refine our responses to life, that's a process that can take a lifetime, each person according to their own level, to really be able to respond in real time from an intuitive place that's pure, that's clean, that's coming from a healthy direction. So that's a lot more work.
Does meditation also help with tapping into Chokhmah over Dimya?
For sure. The goal of meditation is to reduce the power of the imagination over the mind. So when a person is basically within the flow of life, within the flow of their day, they don't even have time to think about what's imagination and what's seichel. They're just living, they're just doing it. And so only when they stop and they slow down can they start looking at their thoughts and try to analyze what's really taking place. And what happens is the longer a person sits with himself, he starts realizing how steeped in imagination he is. He starts peeling those layers. And if a person can peel these layers of imagination where he doesn't have he's not carrying anymore a story with him, he's just interacting with life live, so then that's when the intuition can really become pure. When the intuition is not based on opinions about other people, it's not based on opinions about what might happen or projections or all the other things, it's based on a direct interaction with life, where you just let your spirit do what it wants to do and you don't look back. And so that type of an intuitive interaction can only happen when a person doesn't have opinions so much anymore. He's just allowing life to play out. Because as long as we do, if we have these opinions, they're going to get in the way of our intuition. Our intuition is not going to identify to us whether what it's coughing up is based on a real truth that's happening live, or it's based on an opinion that's been stuck in the system for 30 years.
This intelligence that we speak of, okay, that is the source of us, right? And
Yes.
It's kind of like a lot of art. You don't think, you just do, and then you're able to think after you did it, right?
Yeah.
So the Seichel was saying that Koyach HaDimyon is very powerful, obviously, and if you're going to use it, at least use it for the better, in order to guide you back.
We're all going to use it. We have to use it.
Right, we're destined. It's what we are.
No, it's a very, very important force in our lives, and it's extremely important that we get it to be healthy, because we need it. There's no way that we can make away with our imagination and still exist. This is the primary way of us thinking. You know, this is how we do it. So the imagination needs to be cleansed. There's no doing away with it. It needs to be fixed.
So imagination, they're saying, is always, you know, there's the conscious and then the subconscious. We use consciousness to filter to make our subconscious, so when the subconscious is activated, at least it's very healthy. Right?
Yes.
So when you sleep, you're not aware, you're not conscious, but whatever you've fed it through your life,
it's chewing it over, and it's reorganizing and all that.
So yeah, it defragments, it's constantly, but it's an intelligence that's beyond us. Everyone admits that there is something bigger in themselves that's more. My question with intelligence is that why isn't the Torah, I mean, the Torah is just filled with all these antidotes to come back. Why is the result so difficult? That, I mean, we could say it's people, right? That's people that gave a bad name to God. So it wasn't him. But everything that we had was Elu Mazeh. Like we have the Mishkan for the Paraduma. I mean, for the Ego. We have this for that, this one for that. What's the antidote for this unconsciousness that is just prevalent all over?
Everything. When you say we had the Paraduma, for example, for the Ego, what that really means is that for that piece of the puzzle where the imagination is broken, and therefore the Ego happened, to fix the imagination, in that area we have Paraduma. So everything is to fix the imagination, every single thing that we do. Because the imagination is running our life, and right now it's not running it well. You know, this type of autopilot came way before Tesla. This has been around for thousands of years, where we're running on autopilot based on our imagination. It's throwing thoughts and ideas and potential actions into our consciousness, and then we just play them out. But we don't have control over what's coming up with these ideas in the first place. And so the imagination has been rogue for 4,000 years, at least. Before that it was rogue also, but it wasn't so much controlled. It wasn't culture, there wasn't civilization, so it was rogue individually. But then the cultures and the civilizations that were created, they were all created based on faulty imaginations. They were created in ways that caused the imagination to further crackle and to further remove itself from the service of humanity, and to become even more its enemy, even more restricting to humanity, not allowing humanity to think and to recognize itself. So the wise people throughout these generations were in charge of trying to direct the flow of consciousness in order to create a potential where the future can be better. And so obviously for people that are wise and understood, for people like Moshe, for people like Ezra, for people like Shlomo, it would be easiest if they can just wake everybody up and fix the imagination in their time. But that, they realized, wasn't an option. So the next question would be, how do you condition a society so that eventually when somebody wakes up, he'll be able to wake everybody up with him? So what do you need to do in order to have already all the different parts of societal life arranged, all the different energies that people are going to need, all the different investments that people are going to need to make, whether it's time, whether it's effort, whether it's work, whether it's wisdom, understanding. There's so many elements that go into creating the society that they envisioned. How do we create a society that's one step away from there? That somebody can just, flip the first domino stick and then they're all going to fall over.
They had the foresight. They knew we were going.
They understood exactly what's happening. They were involved in the decline, so they knew step by step how humanity went from being divine, being godly, being at the level of the Avos, and mamish generation after generation. How each person was so much smaller than the previous one that the previous one couldn't even explain to him what he understood about life anymore. The generation after wouldn't understand. And so they mamish saw the decline. They saw it happen. They saw it live, and they were in pain. They understood what that means for the future, and so they prepared already a formula that when people will understand and follow this formula, then it will just change everything. Everything will fall into place. And part of the formula is that people should know what it means for a while, because that makes it so much more powerful when it becomes revealed. And so all of this is really part of the formula. Everything that we've gone through, we didn't miss. Nothing happened that shouldn't have happened. It just happened. It just happened in a very painful way because we are very sick in a certain sense. We are very removed from what's really taking place, and we were very selfish when it comes to interacting with life. And so all these things cause that life cannot be the way that it needs to be. We're not giving it the energy that it needs to be the way that it needs to be. We're not giving it the interactions. We're not giving it the speech. We're not giving it the meaning. We're not giving it the motivation that it should allow itself to become what it needs to become. And so the Torah is preparing us, and it's constantly preparing us. Even if somebody is just learning pshat and he's handling and bundling all day about different things that are never going to become relevant in his life, at least he's preparing his imagination so that one day when he does get something real to understand, he'll know how to chew it.
So Chazal that were trying to get rid of energies like Arizal or other desires that we saw were getting in the way of intelligence, they were able to manipulate. Because I don't.
They had to manipulate.
At a healthy stage, why do we get unhealthy? Like, where did we go unhealthy from Shlomo Melech? What happened?
Shlomo Melech was not where we needed to be, and we haven't been where we needed to be from the Chet of Adam Rishon. So this was just a trajectory where the interaction between consciousness and the nervous system became separate, became unnatural. And it never recovered, even by Shlomo Melech, it didn't recover. The human nervous system is not running on a platform, on an operating system that's suitable to its nature. And until we fix that problem, humanity can't be healthy. It's not possible. Because the nervous system is extremely complex. You can't just come in there and hotwire the system, you know? That's what Nimrod was trying to do. He says, if we can't do it the way that he wants us to do it, we're just going to connect some loose ends here and there, and we'll make it work. And he was very smart, and he knew what he was doing, and it worked enough so that people followed it, but it didn't work enough to be comfortable. It didn't work enough to allow humanity to coexist. It was the beginning of all wars. It was the beginning of all strife, of all people against people, nation against nation. All that started from the Tower of Babel. Before that, that concept didn't exist. Nimrod was the first king humanity ever put on a throne as a leader, and he said, Adam Elo Elyon, I'm going to be like God. And he was. In many ways he was. He was the imagination, he was the interpretation of life to all of humanity in his time, except Avram. And that's why Avram got on his nerves.
And he's still getting on his nerves.
Well, right now I don't know who's getting more on. I don't know who's getting on whose nerves more. I think Nimrod is annoying Avram even more than Avram is annoying Nimrod.
Do you think Hitler was the modern day Nimrod?
Hitler was a result of Nimrod. It was the same way of thinking. We're gonna take charge, and we're gonna make the world better. Who cares what he's planning? I'll tell you what he should have done. That type of thinking.
Scary. Wow.
Well, it happens everywhere you look. People telling God what life should have been. You know, this is us. This is civilization. We're part of it.
So the key ingredients for tapping into the Chokhmah Elyono are, as I mentioned before, tikkun hamidus and refining the imagination.
Developing the brain, the intelligence.
The intelligence and imagination.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, and a lot of focus in lots of is on this, developing the intelligence and how to get healthy intelligence. But surely tikkun hamidus is something that we can work on far more proactively and effectively, that can take us to the next stage, which is refining refining the mind is infinitely more difficult when the inner person, the essential person, is in turmoil, which is, and all that turmoil comes from bad midas.
Yes.
And that the tikkun hamidus is something that we can more proactively do, that leads us to the second stage, which is refining the mind, which then goes to Chokhmah Elyono.
True. But any learning that we do is also part of developing the brain. So anything, if we learn, even if we learn
amorphous in terms of feeling closer to Chokhmah Elyono.
Through the midas.
The midas is a much more real feeling, that the emotional benefit gain, and somewhat pleasure that we get from having conquered a midah.
For sure. So the midah will allow you in. The midah is your way through the door. But what are you going to get once you're in? That a lot depends on your vessel. You understand? So any form of learning, it will happen automatically. Even just to try to perfect our midas, we need to learn a lot of information, and we need to discipline ourselves, and we need to. So all these things are also building the imagination, also building intelligence. So everything we do basically builds intelligence. That's why Reb Shimon Yochai says that if somebody says Kriyash Mashachas v'Arvis, he was Yoitze v'Gisa b'Yomim v'Loila. Because once he learned that pasuk of the Yichud Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that means that his entire day is now going to be from a different perspective. Looking at the world from that perspective of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that is learning. That's the definition of learning.
I was assuming he used any thought to the actual words that he's saying.
Yes.
It means reading in the sense of learning. Otherwise, even if he would learn all day, we wouldn't benefit much.
Yeah.
So the idea is that life is a learning experience constantly. We never stop learning. But it's only learning if you're looking at it from the right eyes, from the right perspective. If we look at it from the wrong perspective, then we're just getting our emotions tangled up, but we're not really learning.
I wanted to just ask him, like, practically, I don't know, just like, it kind of made sense to me in this way, like, just want to check with it. When you said, like, when something happens, and then and like, if you're in reality, you realize it happened already, like, it doesn't matter if you wanted it to happen or not, it happened, that's it. And like maybe that's the way that we could be able to, something hard happens in the moment and just say like, it happened, and that helps you be able to like move forward.
Yeah.
Instead of like sticking with it.
Yeah, so if there's an emotional response, we have to deal with the emotional response. We're not saying that we should ride over our emotions. What we're saying is that our mind shouldn't be arguing that it should have been otherwise. Because that's just useless. If we're upset, we're allowed to become upset, and we're allowed to do whatever it takes to not be upset. We're allowed to compensate ourselves. We're allowed to do many things in order to deal with the fallout of the event. But we do not want to be in an argument about an event that already took place, and we're saying, no, we want to live in a universe where that event didn't happen, because that universe doesn't exist.
Like, for example, let's say someone gets a speeding ticket. How do you break that up to differentiate, let's say that?
So you don't start with, shoots, it shouldn't have happened, and I should have done this, and I was going to come home earlier, and only because my husband didn't give me the car on time, and all that stuff. So, all these cheshbonis are a complete waste of time. If you're saying, wow, this is a real sum of money that I'm going to have to pay, that's difficult, and it doesn't feel right, so maybe instead of heading straight home, maybe you need to head somewhere where you're going to go for a little walk, you're going to go sit down, maybe you're not ready for the kids. So that's dealing with the situation, but it's not arguing with the situation. We can't argue with the situation, it's over.
What about like getting really upset? Oh my gosh! I don't know. What you're saying?
So that depends. But obviously, we would much rather if we can just be okay with it. That would be a much higher level of work. But not everybody's ready for that. But everybody is ready to be logical enough and say that arguing with what already is not going to take us anywhere good. We have to look at it's a different look. It's a different way of seeing. You know, if we would have gotten used to this way of seeing from childhood, it wouldn't even be a discussion. But because we are so much thinking that, like Nimrod, like we're going to control life, we're going to tell life what to do. This is our responsibility. We should have been. This should have been. And people spoke to us in that language, and people created that ego inside of us and made it so hard because we constantly had to defend it. So now it's work to undo a faulty, a sick way of thinking. It's a very unhealthy way of thinking, where we're basically ruining our nervous system over something that we cannot control. It's not possible. Past is gone. It's over. We've been trained to do it. If you didn't do it, then you'd be in a lot of trouble. So people made sure you do it, and they constantly reinforced you're doing it by holding you responsible. You know, if it wasn't enough that you got something wrong, now you're going to get yelled at for getting it wrong.
Not only that, we often get told, why aren't you more angry about this?
Exactly.
Right, you should be more upset.
Yeah, why are you upset?
You should be
the
so
Micah the
upset.
Measure, it's a story that the house burnt down and his mother was crying. And he was saying, like she was getting all caught up emotionally.
Right.
He said, it's enough now that we have to deal with a new house. We also have to deal with you not being okay with it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like now we have two problems.
Yeah, yeah. And the second one is bigger than the first one. The house is the easy problem.
I remember reading that.
Having an upset mother or mother-in-law is a much bigger problem.
When you have either a business decision to make or someone's asking you advice or a question on something.
It happens to me all the time.
Right. So usually to get into Das, which is essentially tapping into Chokhmah, it might take time. It's not like necessarily, unless you've trained yourself, you're not going to be able to give an answer straight away. You're not going to be able to make that business decision right now. You're not going to be able to tell that person, okay, this is what you need to do right now.
Okay.
So how do you deal with the world that needs instant answers when you need to take time to be able to tap into Chokhmah and not give an answer from it?
Well, if somebody else is coming to ask you for advice, then you don't owe them anything. You can do whatever you want and give them the answer whenever and however you feel like it. If it's life, the way that we live life has to be responded to in whatever way it demands of us. It's not necessarily reasonable. We don't live in a reasonable time. We don't live in a time where anything is based on what's right or what's good or what's proper or what's real. It just is, because it happened to become this way at some point in history, and it stayed that way, and nobody ever changed it since. So we have to put up with these things until the world will be in a different place where it will actually be designed for human beings. Right now it's designed for ideas and concepts and beliefs and all kinds of stuff from the past, but it's not really catering to humanity, to the human nervous system, because nobody knows what the human nervous system needs. You know, we're not really understanding it enough to create a proper environment for it yet.